everybody, it's Rob Acton again with another video in the series of how to play videos for my game, The City of Stains, which is available for play on Tabletop Simulator. This video is not really a specific technical video, but I really wanted to address an important issue in the game and something about which I have received a few queries since these videos went up, and that is the extent to which diplomacy is allowed in the game, whether it is open diplomacy, so-called, whether agreements reached are binding, and the short answer to those questions is that the City of Stains is a diplomatic game. The diplomacy is open and agreements are not binding. In other words, it is possible to be double-crossed. It is, after all, a political game, and politicians in any genre are renowned for these sort of things. So I wanted to give you some examples with reference to Tabletop Simulator of how diplomacy plays into the game. The first thing you need to know is that certain commodities in the game are tradable. Uh, those include building cards. If you have building cards that you haven't played, you may trade them or sell them to other players. It's up to you what you want to sell them for. Likewise, treasures in the game may be exchanged with other players, and you can do so at whatever rate you choose. The same token, players can agree to exclude each other from effects and to rather target other players. Of course, players can be influenced to rather target other players. Uh, what you cannot do diplomatically and by agreement is remove influence from the board. So the player of the church could not simply remove two influence by agreement with the player playing the enemy in this case. So you can't add or remove influence by agreement, but you can exchange building cards, money, treasures, and favors. There's specific political and diplomatic elements built into the various factions. So, for example, the crown has an ability to decide ties. Now, that in the case of tying for the most influence in a quarter is only after there's still a tie after the tiebreak mechanism. But in the case of, say, the Royal Council, tied votes are ultimately decided by the Crown. So there is a political element to getting the Crown to agree in certain circumstances that a tie should be decided in your favor. And that can be done by promises, by the exchange of the commodities already mentioned, or any other diplomatic means, you know, within the limits of human decency, obviously. In the same way, the church has the potential to grant rerolls. One reroll per player per turn, but any player who asks for and accepts a reroll can then reroll any dice that they have rolled badly on. They have to accept the result, and the church gains an influence anywhere when players make use of this. But of course, the church does not have to give away its favors for free. It can demand quid pro quo for allowing those rerolls. So those are specific examples of factions that are tied directly into the question of diplomacy. Obviously, the Royal Council is a place where either decrees or advanced actions can be put into effect, provided you can get enough votes. Of course, this is fertile ground for horse trading to try and advance your position in the game in other aspects. So, in that sense, the diplomacy is very much open. Uh, it is not binding in the sense you could tell another faction that you were going to vote in favor of their advanced action and ultimately not do so. Um, you won't make any friends that way, and you're unlikely to receive any favors in the future from that player. But in a game about politics, this is the reality of the diplomacy. Another example where diplomacy comes up is something which I didn't really cover when I dealt with the contest basic action. You'll recall this is the basic action in which factions attempt to reduce the amount of influence that a rival faction has in that area. And this is done by way of a die roll, modified by the number of influence that faction has and by the level of their leader. For present purposes, I'm going to assume all the leaders in this example are level 1, just to make matters easier. Imagine in this scenario, the guild player decides they wish to engage in a contest with the circle player, who's blue. They're entitled to do so because both factions have influence in the quarter. That's a prerequisite for targeting or for initiating a contest. They both do. The guild has 6 influence, whereas the circle only has 4. And what is more, the guild has decided that the leader instigating this contest will be none other than the guild master himself. And his special ability is that rather than a d6, he rolls a d8 when it comes to contests. So I'm going to get the d8 and just have it ready. The circle player has no such ability. Dr. Ersatz, who's the circle leader, has the ability to draw rats with him in the style of the Pied Piper, but he's not particularly effective in a contest. In other words, he rolls the standard d6. Now, this could be the case if the contest was about to kick off, but before any dice are rolled, the competing parties in a contest can elect to attempt to enter into an alliance for purposes of this contest. And that's why I have included the uh, the crown, and in particular, General Virox. Because let's say the relationship between the guild and the crown is not particularly good, but the circle and the crown are not enemies in the game, or at least are playing relatively in a way that's relatively friendly to each other. The circle player could petition the crown player in this regard to assist them as an ally in the contest. If the crown agreed, they could they would add their number of influence to the total. So it'd be 4 influence for the circle plus 3 for a total of 7, modified by the die roll. And what is more, the allied crown player could, rather than have the circle player roll a die, use its leader in place of the circle's leader. And in this case, General Virox is the most powerful leader in contest in the game, and he has access to a d10. Well, what is in this agreement for the crown, you may ask? Well, that's up to the players. Remember, the winning faction would place an influence token here to indicate a contest victory and give them a bonus to future contest victories, which would be cumulative. The crown could enter into the alliance on the basis that they, in the event of success, would get the contest victory rather than the circle who would normally get it. And let's imagine the circle thinks that's the only real prospect of winning the contest. So the circle and the crown agree. They will ally against the contest instigated by the guild. They will pool their influence resources. And bear in mind, just pooling resources doesn't mean the ally will suffer losses. As things stand, it is only the circle who will suffer losses, but the parties can agree to share the losses if they wish, or the ally could in fact agree to take any losses. But let's imagine that hasn't been the case here. The only agreement is that if the defending side wins, then the crown will gain the contest victory rather than the circle, exchange for which the crown lends its influence and will be the party rolling the die. Because General Virox is there, they're entitled to roll a d10. So normally this would be simultaneous, but for present purposes, let's say the guild rolls their d8, they get a 7. 7 is added to the 6 influence they have there, and the 1 level of the guild leader for a total of 14. On the other hand, the defenders now have 7 influence and they roll a d10, which unfortunately for them results in a 1. This would mean that if General Virox is level 1, that their total would be 9 to the 14 of the guild, which would mean that the circle player would lose 5 influence. In this case, they only have 4, so they would lose all their influence. And according to the rules of the game, the guild would lose half that amount, i.e. 2. So that would actually work out pretty badly for the circle, not too bad for the guild, and quite conveniently for the crown. Well, let's imagine the same die were rolled, and having rolled a 1, the crown looked to the church, who was also in the game. The crown player said to the church player, I'm prepared for you to get another influence anywhere on the board, but please grant me a reroll. And the church player says, well, what's in it for me? Crown player responds, well, I have this card in my hand called the monastery. I'm prepared to give you this card for only 2 coins in the event you grant the reroll. Church player is a bit smarter than that, says, no, 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 I'll just take the card. Thank you very much. I'm not paying you any coins. And the crown agrees, gets a reroll. It's bound by the result. Now rolls a 3, 4, 7. 4 is 11 compared to the 14 of the guild. Would the circle in those instances would lose 3 and the guild would lose 1 and be the successful party. Now you can't you can do the reroll once you've rolled any die, provided you haven't used up your 1 reroll granted to you by the church in any given round. And remember, rerolls will only exist if there is a church player in the game. So the contests are a specific example where diplomacy can come into it. The other general examples I've already cited, but I hope this gives you an idea of the nature of diplomatic engagement in the city and how much you're entitled to engage in. Feel free to be creative. If you want to have a sidebar with another faction, if you want to go out the room and agree to pay them 5 coins to use their assassination card on a specific leader, you can do so. That's all part and parcel of the game. The game is robust in that sense, and uh, particularly in higher player count games, diplomacy becomes a crucial and essential element of the game. So that's diplomacy. I hope that gives you an idea of how much there is in the game and how you would potentially go about using it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I had planned to end the sequence here, but going back and looking at some of the previous videos, I have realized that there have been some omissions and even some errors made in the previous video. So my last video in this series will simply be one in which I clean up any misapprehensions, uh, tidy up any mistakes I've made, and hopefully fill in the blanks for the aspects of the game that I haven't properly covered. But up until now, it's been a very enjoyable experience going through this with you. Thank you for the feedback and for the questions. Enjoy playing the City of Stains, and I'll see you on the next video. This is Rob saying goodbye.